I think it's about time for another PC build, so today we're going to be putting together another epic custom PC using a bunch of these new parts from DeepCool. And a big shout out to DeepCool for sending out the parts and also sponsoring this video, so if you want to check out any of these parts for yourself, they will be linked in the description. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Before we start the build, let's take a look at the parts we're going to be using. As mentioned, DeepCool have sent over a bunch of gear for this build, including a case, an AIO cooler, a power supply, some case fans, and also something a little special that we'll get onto later. For the case, we have this sleek looking black CH360, which is an M80X case with a focus on increasing airflow. Not only does this case have a mesh panel on the front and top, but it's also one of the first I've seen to include a mesh section below the glass on this hybrid side panel to allow even more cooling air in. It also comes with two pre-installed 140mm ARGB fans in the front and a 120mm ARGB fan in the rear. You can also fit up to a 360mm radiator in the front, up to 240mm in the top, and 120mm in the back. And to make building life easier, the side panel is magnetic, as are the air filters, there's a removable hard drive cage, and even a graphics card bracket installed too. Now for cooling, we have here one of DeepCool's new Mystique 360 liquid coolers, and I am very much looking forward to seeing this in action. It has a 360mm radiator with 3 pre-installed fans included, which we'll be switching out for matching ARGB fans. But the coolest part about this, pardon the pun, is the new 2.8-inch TFT LCD screen on the pump head. It has a 640 by 480 pixel resolution, and paired with the Deep Creative software, you can display and monitor vital hardware information such as CPU frequency, temps, pump RPM, and fan speeds. You can also display media like GIFs and pictures, and a recording mode for your hardware. Plus, I have to say, it has one of the cleanest pump head designs I've seen on a cooler. As I mentioned, I'll be switching out the included fans and replacing them with these FC120 fans which match the rest of the ones in the case. To power the build, DeepCool also sent their PX1200G power supply, which comes kitted out with compatibility for 16-pin GPU connectors, so no need for adapters when using 40 series cards. And it has a hybrid fan mode, allowing you to switch to a semi-fanless operation, keeping the fan off until the system hits a certain load, kicking the fan into life. Finally, the last thing they sent over is a variety of colours of these pixel case bits. And what's great about these is that they actually fit into the mesh panel on the front of the case, so you can create your own colourful design to personalise your PC case. I think this is a fantastic idea and is a great way for you to fully create your own unique PC case design for your setup with whatever pixel creation you can imagine. They've sent over a ton of colours, so I need to get creative once this build is finished. So those are all the parts DeepCool have sent over, but we need some other bits to finish off the build. Fortunately, I had this spare MSI PC laying around, so I'm going to be taking some spare parts from that, including the CPU and SSD. Those include an Intel i7-13700KF and 1TB Samsung SSD. Then I also have this BioStar B660M motherboard and 32 gigs of Delta DDR4 RAM. And for the final piece of the jigsaw is this RTX 4070 Super Founders Edition card. So now let's crack on with the build, and the first thing we need to do is get the motherboard assembly put together. As mentioned, I'm using this BioStar B660M, which is an M80X motherboard, and pairing it with this i7-13700KF CPU. With the CPU in now, we can install 32GB of DDR4 3600 RAM. So let's get those slotted into place. And then finally we can take this 1TB M.2 SSD and get that installed into the motherboard assembly as well. Now it's time to install the Mystique 360 AIO cooler. We're not going to be using the pre-installed fans on this cooler, so let's get those removed first. And with those removed, now we can attach the pump block to the motherboard. First, we need to attach the correct brackets for our motherboard to the back of the pump head, and now we can take the retention bracket and slot that in through the rear of the motherboard and add the 4 spacers. The Mystique 360 cooler does come with pre-applied thermal paste, so with all of that in place, we can carefully attach the pump head to the bracket. And then we can secure it into place with these 4 thumb screws. With all of that together, it's time to get the motherboard and cooler into the case. Believe it or not, this is the first M80X build I've actually done, and it was nice and easy to slot the assembly in and install it. For the next part, we need to install the radiator into the case, but it's going to involve a bit of a reshuffle. As this case only supports a 360mm radiator in the front, that's where we'll need to mount it. In order to do that, we need to remove the front panel and then take out the 240mm fans from the front of the case. With those removed, now we can take the 320mm ARGB fans and install them in their place, securing them to the case and radiator. Then we can pop the front panel back onto the front of the case. And at this point, I was then going to put the 240mm fans into the top of the case instead, but there's not going to be room because of the tubes from the cooler. So instead, I am actually going to make use of two of the fans that came pre-installed on the radiator and use those up here instead. With all of the cooling sorted, now it's time to install the power supply. I've discovered from doing previous builds that it's always easier to plug the cables into the power supply before you install it into the case, so I definitely recommend that if you're building your own. And then once all of those are in, we can slide it into the case and secure it in with the 4 screws. Now, I have skipped ahead a little bit here and plugged all of the cables in because I hate doing that part and it's a real mess, so I'm not going to show it in the video. But now it's time to install the graphics card, and fun fact, I was actually going to use this 4080 instead, but it turned out to be too big for the case. So that's why I'm using the 4070 Super. Before we can install it though, we need to remove these slots from the back of the case. And with those out of the way, we can take our 4070 Super and carefully slot it into the PCIe slot on the motherboard. And the final step is to plug in the GPU cable, and the build is basically done. I've got to say, this PC build is looking super clean, and these new parts from DeepCool have actually come together really nicely. I mean, I don't know why I sound surprised because DeepCool do make some really nice PC parts, and you can see that from this build. But of course, there is one more important thing left to do before we can turn this on, and that is to peel the plastic off the glass. Now that that satisfying part is over, it is time for what I think is one of the most stressful parts of building a PC. Putting it into the setup and powering it on to see if it boots up. But apparently I know what I'm doing because as you can see, everything booted up just fine. And man, does this PC look good. The combination of parts came out so nicely together, and the new Mystique 360 cooler looks absolutely fantastic. I said earlier that I thought the design looked really sleek and clean, but now that it's powered on, it really blew me away. I don't build that many darker themed PCs on this channel, but this one certainly came out nicely. Even the fact we ended up having to use different fans in the top, it still looks really nice. And the airflow in this PC is going to be absolutely top notch, so no temperature issues whatsoever. But of course, the build isn't quite finished yet. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten about adding these little pixel bits. Now, I'm not the most creative person in the world, but this is the design that I came up with, and I have to say, I think it looks great. Putting my lack of creativity aside, this is such a clever and simple idea to allow you to add some personality and uniqueness to your PC build. I've got to hand it to DeepCool on this. I really like the addition to the case, and I think this will be great for so many people building their PCs. And of course, I want to hear in the comments, what would you guys design if you had this in your PC setup? And let me know what you think of the overall build. Did it come out better than you expected? Big thank you again to DeepCool for sending over these parts and sponsoring the build and video. And thank you to you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you in the next one. See you later.